This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We want to know more, do you? Informed Sources brings our region's top print and broadcast journalists together
to examine the stories behind the headlines.
And we can all learn more.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, you know that a neighborhood is supposed to be a fun place when it has its own celebration. And this, the weekend of the French Quarter Festival, we will celebrate its history and culture, but also be reminded about a tragic start to this year and lingering concerns about crime. We'll look at the safety of the neighborhood that made the city famous, including possible traffic changes on the area's best-known street. There will be traffic heading to Baton Rouge as the legislature convenes Monday for its annual session. Appropriately, one of the issues to be examined is the regulation of automobile insurance. Elsewhere, as New Orleans mayoral election approaches, we will look at the politics of councilmember at large, an office that has launched several past mayors. And in this, the week of Easter, our Future Watch segment examines a regionally based company that makes seasonal candy. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, Julie O'Donoghue, senior writer, Louisiana Illuminator, and Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL Louisiana, Channel 4. And we're going to stick with Mike. Big weekend this weekend, French Quarter Festival, gorgeous weather predicted, ton of people going to be there, and of course we are concerned about security and crime. So let's talk about security measures specifically for the festival.
Well, what you're going to see, and anyone who's been down there, say during Super Bowl or any of Carnival, including Mardi Gras, whole new kind of layers of security, including those wedge barriers, some restrictions on traffic. Some of the things with the French Quarter Festival in particular had already, been in place for past festivals. Some bag checks for people walking in. All of that's going to be enhanced, however, in light of the New Year's terror attack. And it's always a balance between keeping it sort of loose and festive, and especially the French Quarter Festival, which is free and spread throughout the entire quarter. It's a real walking event in which people roam from one stage to another, food areas, all the way down Waldenburg Park, the Mint. And so you want things to be as least restrictive, for the fun of the people who go, but also to be safe at the same time. And that's the balance that they try to strike. And, frankly, New Orleans, with all its long history during Carnival, as well as these festivals, is renowned for doing just that, keeping a pretty, festive atmosphere, having the security not, feel really oppressive, but it has heightened. It has heightened since that New Year's attack, no doubt.
Yeah, as we would think that it would, or certainly hope that it would. But there are street closures in the French Quarter, and just all around. You really can't drive around there for the most part.
That's right, and some of that is just for traffic logistics, because if everyone tried to jam into the quarter, when you have tens of thousands of people jamming this relatively small physical area, you cannot handle that level of traffic, because you still have to have deliveries to all of the bars and restaurants. You still have to have passage for emergency vehicles if needed, as well as for the festival itself, which is setting up stages with music equipment, food vendors, and all of their equipment. That's really just kind of designed for logistics as much as it is for safety. Interesting thing about the French Quarter in general, and that gets rightfully so, an oversized attention, when it comes to New Orleans in general, but crime specifically, is that what if I told you that, that neighborhood of the French Quarter has the highest number of incidents per crime per capita for the number of people, anywhere in the city, mainly because of minor incidents. When you jam that many people, you're going to have reports of, fights break out, drunk in public, occasionally during big events, thefts, pickpockets, stolen cell phones. But it's also the safest per capita in the measures of the response times. The place is a very concentrated area with a large police presence, not just NOPD, but all the sort of supplemental patrols, Troop NOLA, from state police. The Homeland Security has its own sort of security guard presence. And there's the supplemental patrols that people often see in those little smart cars that was introduced by Sidney Torres years ago, and it has stuck beyond his initial grant. The officers on off-duty detail riding around in those little smart cars, where the residents and business owners have an app. If there is a disturbance or something that looks suspicious, they dial up the app, get pretty quick response. So it's, both just by the virtue of so many people packed in, tourists, visitors, some major hotels, is going to have a lot of individual incidents of crime. And the other thing that is true when you look at the crime statistics of the French Quarter, I call it the law of small numbers, which is, murders in the French Quarter are generally pretty rare, single-digit numbers almost every year. But if there's a mass shooting or the terror attack, which took 14 innocent lives, you can see how that is going to spike the number far beyond previous years that might have saw 3 or 4 killings. And even last year, right before Thanksgiving, there was a mass shooting, 4 people shot, 1 killed. So a single incident draws a lot of attention, a lot of negative headlines, and it skews the statistics.
But right now, for this weekend, certainly, there are a lot of measures in place to try to keep everybody safe.
And I think there's just heightened vigilance. Law enforcement obviously has a plan, but I think in light of what has happened with the New Year's attack, that people going are just a little more aware, see something, say something, anything out of the ordinary.
Go there and enjoy yourself. And also, like you said, bars and restaurants also open, as well as the food vendors and all their music. A lot to do. All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Okay, it's going to be popping next week in Baton Rouge also, with the legislative regular session beginning. And so, we're hearing about maybe some legislators not really falling exactly in line behind the governor as they did last year. So, Julia, what are we going to be seeing this week?
Well, yeah, I think you are seeing that. The governor's had a bad couple weeks. The election we had a couple weeks ago for the constitutional amendments didn't just not go his way. It went down in flames. And I think that might have emboldened some people to push back against him on certain things. A lot of conservative legislators are frustrated that they can't get some caps on lawsuits, some restrictions on trial lawyers and lawsuits, because the governor, while very conservative, is also very closely aligned with the trial attorneys as well. So they've been frustrated, I would say, for well over a year, that he won't go along with some things that they think are conservative principles and that the business community really wants. And they may be trying to push those things on him this year. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on automobile insurance. There are some bills to deal with property insurance, homeowners insurance, but they're not getting the attention that the automobile bills are getting. And that's kind of interesting because polling is showing insurance is the most important issue to people right now, but I'm not sure it's just automobile insurance.
Homeowners insurance is costing people a whole lot more money than car
I think people are very
insurance.
concerned about property insurance.
And the increases, car insurance edges up every year, but the homeowner insurance doubled and tripled.
I would say on both matters, there's some political risks to try to take these on. We've had tort reform bills relatively recently. I mean, people don't like to bring this up, but Governor Edwards let some tort reform go through, and car insurance didn't go down. They passed a bunch of bills about property insurance last year. Property insurance is still continuing to rise. So some of me thinks that the governor's been forced to kind of come out and try to deal with some insurance, and he's very politically savvy, and I think he kind of knows that this might be a losing issue for him because people will be mad if things don't look like they're improving.
And also, you know, Tim Temple is really pushing this whole automotive insurance, automobile insurance changes pretty hard. And so is there some friction now between Landry and
There's a
Tim
lot
Temple?
of friction between them. There's always kind of been friction between them. They would say that there wasn't, but Tim Temple was the one statewide elected official elected in 2023 that wasn't part of Jeff's ticket. I mean, he didn't really have an official ticket, but he was not, you know, Liz Murrell is very closely aligned with Jeff. Tim was coming from, I mean, his political consultants were sort of from a different camp, if you will. And so I don't know that they've ever been all that aligned. But this week it certainly broke open in a way that we haven't seen before.
Well, Temple had the advantage of being elected unopposed, and he
Correct.
the one opponent, the opponent dropped out, so
Yeah.
he didn't need to coddle to the governor.
Right. And Tim Temple is a former insurance executive. He comes from a very pro-insurance company background. Like we just said, the governor has some people in the trial attorney world. Gordon McKernan's probably the one that people think of the most that are aligned with him very closely. So,
And one
They all
question about
wanna-
those constitutional amendments, and I did not see that make the national news the way the Wisconsin Supreme Court race
Right,
did, those races in Florida that were
Right.
closer margins
Yeah.
than previous, you know,
Yeah.
red districts.
sure.
But was there a little, say, MAGA pushback that Landry is so closely aligned with
I think-
President and his administration that it kind of played out in the defeat of those amendments?
I think there were a lot of things going on. I definitely think the MAGA pushback was totally something that was happening. I don't even know if it was so much the governor, although he is aligned with the president, as much as just Democrats. Democrats and black Democrats in particular turned out in much higher numbers than they normally do. And I think some people were angry and they just were like, I want to go vote against some things. But I do think a big factor about the amendments was that people didn't really understand, particularly the budget and tax amendment at all. I even in conservative areas, it went down pretty heavily. Not all places, but a lot of places. And I think a lot of that was just people were uncomfortable voting on something where they couldn't really understand what was happening.
And let us touch real quickly, because of the defeat of that, there is a certain income revenue stream that's not going to be there, which has
Right.
impacted the Gator program, according
Correct.
to Cameron Henry. And explain that's real quickly now with that.
It hasn't really impacted it directly. What has happened, and this got a lot less attention, is the constitutional amendment was going to dump a bunch of money that normally goes into savings accounts into what's called the general fund, which is the money that can be used for anything. Without that money that they were expecting to get, now they have a lot of budget priorities that they can't use that money for. That money will still be going into these savings accounts, and they can't touch it unless they do certain things that might be hard to do. So I think the big issue is they now don't have the money that was going to come in to cover the teachers' stipend.
Yeah.
And now some legislators are like, well, I don't want teachers to get a pay cut, so I still want them to have money, and that puts a big crunch on the budget.
And then also the Gators, the educational voucher
Right.
thing. The governor wants more money for it, apparently, than
Because
what
they
Cameron
don't-
Henry wants.
They don't have a lot of money for a teacher stipend right now. The Gator program, because it would be new, is the place to go because people are not already receiving that benefit. So I think Senator Henry is like, these people haven't even gotten this. We need to move this money over.
So we'll see how it
Yeah.
all plays out.
Yeah.
It'll be an interesting time. All right, thanks a lot, Julia. All righty, Errol, over to you for New Orleans governor administration. The city council at large races kind of. Now
The attention to date has been on the mayor's election, and it's coming together. I don't think it's going to be a very big election in terms of the number of candidates. That's another story. But in the council at large race, which is like the number 2 position, in 1954, the current home rule charter was established, and that was under Della Sips Morrison, who was mayor, and that's the one that established the present form of government, where you have 7 members 5 district council members and 2 at large, which seems to be a popular model because Jefferson Parish uses it, and also Kenner, and so this 5-2 thing is common. But usually an at-large person who's elected at large has kind of like a step up if they want to go up to the executive position. Since Morrison, there have been 8 mayors that have been elected. Of that, 3 of them were council members at large. One of them was Vic Skiro, the other was Moon Landrieu, the other was Sidney Bartholomew. Another one, Jimmy Fitzmaurice, was the guy who Landrieu beat, but there were 2 council members at large, and he went on to be lieutenant governor. And so if you were a council member at large, at least you get a lot of attention. And I think if you could be a council member, that's what you want to be, because I don't think they have as much pressure as the district council members. The district council members, you're in somebody's neighborhood and there's a hole in the street, do something, where I think that they're more insulated. It could have been that the other council member at large, J.P. Morrell, like a year ago, people were seeing J.P. Morrell running too, and you'd have had the 2 council members at large, Morrell and Moreno, running, and Morrell decided not to run.
And they're political allies, so it looked unlikely that they were both going to jump into the same race. And when Helena Moreno, made the early announcement, that pretty much ruled out JP.
Yeah, that would have really just kind of disrupted city government, because you'd have had the 2 council members at large giving up their seat, and essentially.
Well, then you have a battle royal for that, the 2 at large.
But Oliver Thomas, who's the main opponent, was a former council member at large, and so that job brings a certain amount of high profile to it. And of course, the council members at large alternate being president of the council. They do it on an annual basis now. And so when they're council member at large, when they're council president, they're really high profile at the time. And so it's an important job and just politically important, and it's a real stepping stone sort of job.
Okay. All righty, E. Important position it is in the city. Also important is Easter coming up next week, and Easter candy, and just a long-held favorite here, Gold Brick eggs.
Very long-held favorite here. Elmer's candy and their Gold Brick eggs and their Heavenly Hash eggs are a tradition that's really very regional. If you grew up in this area, they were in your Easter basket and on your Easter shelves. If you did not grow up in this area, and by this area I mean roughly Houston to Mobile and not farther. It was somebody else's business. You don't know what they are. Easter candy is only about 5% of Elmer's Candy Company's business, but it's been around for a long time. The Heavenly Hash egg is 102 years old. The Gold Brick egg was started in 1936. These products are only available from Valentine's Day through Easter, with the exception of the Gold Brick ice cream topping that is available all year. This Ponchatoula now-based company, Elmer's Candy, is really, really big business. In 2016, they invested $45 million into their plant. They've been in Ponchatoula since the 1970s. They started on Jackson Avenue with a German immigrant way back in 1855. So they're 170 years old this year. They are now a fully automated company that does the second largest heart-shaped chocolate box candy. That's a lot to get out. But the heart-shaped boxes you see at Valentine's Day, there's only one company that sells more in America, all over America, than Elmer's. So they are a big, and they do a lot of Christmas business too. The only big candy holiday that they're not part of, with Easter and Valentine's Day and Christmas, obviously, is Halloween, and that's a market they're not interested in getting into right now. But lots of kind of fun tidbits about this company in 2025 America. They went all without artificial ingredients and artificial colors back in 2017, before it was necessarily the cool thing to do, trying to have a cleaner label. They also have been struggling, just like every candy company and other food suppliers in the world, really, with the price of chocolate, which tripled in 2024. It's gone back down some. I said, what caused it to go up so much? They source most of their chocolate at Elmer's from West Africa, and the El Nino that's kept us free of hurricanes, it's also kept West Africa dry, too dry, and allowed viruses to get in. So, our gain is their loss, and it costs us more in chocolate. They're watching the tariffs, just like everybody is, to know what might happen for their business. Right now, that doesn't seem to be much of a problem. And they say there will be news coming soon on how their full automation which started really in 2016, is going to grow the company even more. They're between 300 and 350 employees in Ponchatoula. They can box 4,000 chocolates in a minute.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
So it's, you know, a cool company with a cool story. It started with this German immigrant, Christopher Henry Miller, in the 1850s. Miller's daughter then married Augustus Elmer. It became Elmer Candy. There are not Elmers in it anymore. It was bought by the Nelson family, and it's now in its third generation of management and ownership from the Nelson family. But it is big, big, big business, and Elmer's is on the shelves nationwide, but your Gold Bricks and your Heavenly Hash, only local.
Oh, really?
Or
Only
online.
local, yeah. And they're, you know, it was such a joy to find a Heavenly Hash in your Easter basket. That was a real treat. Do they make Easter bunnies too?
They
Do you
don't.
know? They don't make the Easter
They
bunnies.
don't. Their
But
only
the-
Easter products are the eggs in packages about this big. That's it.
There used to be Merlin's, which was made in New Orleans. That was a
And-
bunny, but they sold it to Palmer's. And then,
Which is a Pennsylvania company.
yeah, but I don't think Palmer's does it anymore. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, they're yummy. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Gold Bricks eggs. You got to try one.
I know. I'm a mid-Atlantic girl at heart. They
You'll
didn't
enjoy
show
it.
up
You'll
in my
enjoy it.
Easter basket. I lived a little too close to some of those Pennsylvania companies.
Yeah, you did. Okay, thanks a lot, Don. All right, Mike, let's go on over to you because there was a report that came out this week about security protocol, not just in the French Quarter, but around the city for Mardi Gras, et cetera, and also the idea of no traffic on Bourbon at all. What did we find out?
That's right, and this was commissioned in the wake of the New Year's attack, the terror attack, and at the request of Police Chief Ann Kirkpatrick, the New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation actually came up with the money to hire William Bratton and his global consulting company, Teneo, where they did a real thorough kind of soup to nuts look at how New Orleans could sort of harden its security, not just on Bourbon and not just the French Quarter, but for all major fairs and festivals, Carnival, which obviously occupies, you know, a very long parade route along St. Charles, and obviously that came right in advance of the Super Bowl, which got extra security as a Tier 1, you know, federal security event, heavy federal presence, and their 43-page report just came out, and I guess by virtue of being an investigative reporter, curious about the findings. It had been promised like weeks ago, and I, you know, kind of dogged it, you know, routinely for the 2 weeks and was able to break the story. The biggest finding that jumped out was their recommendation to block those first 8 blocks of Bourbon Street to all vehicular traffic permanently, a permanent pedestrian mall. Now, that's just a recommendation. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. Clearly, it's going to be the subject of considerable discussion and debate. They've already kind of floated some trial balloons, first by blocking a lot of it, you know, for the Super Bowl and for Mardi Gras. And then there was a big meeting that was an overflow crowd, standing room only, to discuss the changes, including bollards, barricades, checkpoints, and got quite a bit of pushback. Now, even Ann Kirkpatrick, in finally kind of formally announcing the, you know, William Bratton plan, she said, well, we have to balance, you know, what's optimal versus what's feasible. And she said, oh, the term she used was, we, you know, appreciate the Fort Knox approach, but will it work in New Orleans, where the French Quarter, it's a, you know,
It's a residential neighborhood,
it's a
too.
living, breathing neighborhood, which is a mix, obviously, not just the tourist playpen, but people who live there, all those businesses with quite a lot of, you know, delivery truck traffic, and that has to be accounted for. These are very narrow streets that still need passage of emergency vehicles when needed. So look for perhaps some debate leading to a compromise rather than a full 8-block, you know, closure, which actually extends, you know, all the way to Dumaine, from Canal to Dumaine, which is a little beyond sort of the heart of the tourist area. And I was able to do a story in which I spoke to a gentleman who was just outside of Dumaine on St. Philip, where during they made pedestrian mall, obviously for, you know, for Carnival, and Mardi Gras, and he said, well, that did not stop traffic from coming to the French Quarter. It just put it on my street, St. Philip, and he was able to show pictures and video from his balcony. It was a gridlock, wall-to-wall traffic situation in just one street over from where things were being blocked. So it's going to be an interesting, discussion. Obviously, the council will get involved. It sounds like they're going to have some hearings before the city council on that issue, as well as other aspects of this, security plan. Some things were really kind of interesting, no-brainers, like let's not put trash cans on parade routes where they could, where people could hide bombs.
Right.
Same with portalets. And so look for a lot of easy changes and a lot that are going to be the subject of a lot of discussion.
All righty, Mike, thanks a lot. All right, guys, other stories.
I'm going to use my time for a quick story, going back to Dawn. Remember Katz and Bestoff? When Katz and Bestoff closed, they sold to a chain called Rite Aid. Easter comes, and people go into Rite Aids, and they go to the candy things. There are no Elmer's products. People are outraged. No Elmer's products at Rite Aid. So they contacted. Guy from Elmer's goes to Rite Aid office in Pennsylvania. He said, why didn't you buy Elmer's? He says, well, there's regional products all over the country, and regional products don't sell. And I said, well, hey, this is Elmer's in the South. They sell, okay? But it was too late. And so the Elmer's people had made all this overstock, assuming they get the same order as Katz and Bestoff, nowhere to go. Walgreens found out about it. Walgreens created some extra shelves in their stores, bought the Elmer's products, and stacked their shelf that year. That is why Walgreens succeeds.
That's right.
And why Rite Aid
I'm sure the product sold.
I'm going to tag onto that actually because Elmer's shows up regionally for Easter. Everywhere else in the country, it's that big national brand. It's not anybody else's regional brand. It's an anomaly that even the Elmer's company itself can't understand. They're just happy to have the Easter business, but it defies retail odds.
We're happy to have it too, Julia.
I'm going to be watching the new health secretary. The governor announced a new health secretary today, who actually was the health secretary when Governor Bobby Jindal was in office and was forced out of his job at that time because he came under scrutiny from the federal government and the state about a Medicaid contract that was going to his former employer. So his name's Bruce Greenstein. He is back in charge of a $20 billion agency.
All right. Mike?
Well, in less than a month, Gaston Corbin is leaving the director of Sewage and Water Board, and what to look for is that the search for his successor is well underway. I understand there's a short list now of finalists. Nothing's been made public, but look for that to happen pretty soon at the Sewage and Water Board.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
From Masterpiece to Nova, Antiques Roadshow to Agatha Christie,
And of course, stepping out and inform sources.
we are pleased to support public television
It's been our passion.
for a lifetime.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.